Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. I want to draw your attention to an intriguing conversation I had with Dean John Zarnetsky, CEO and Dean of the Ave Maria School of Law, in the first hour of today's program. We were talking about the Scopes monkey trial, some of the historical heritages, but also how the trial impacts the way we think about First Amendment rights and educational constitutional rights to this very day. In this hour, we will first be joined by our friend Andrea Pichotti-Bear about lessons from Pope Leo and, of all things, sourdough. Now, unbeknownst to many people, because I don't talk about this too much except amongst friends, I bake sourdough. And this was a fun piece that Andrea Pichotti-Bear wrote in the National Catholic Register, Kneading Faith into Summer. Pope Leo XIV has, just like some of his predecessors, John Paul II was a huge proponent of this. He has pushed us, especially during the summer, to not be so concerned overtly with the work of productivity and efficiency. In fact, John Paul II cautioned us against an overt emphasis to the point of obsession of efficiency. During the summer, Pope Leo XIV observed this past Sunday, we have more free time in which to gather our thoughts and reflect, and also to travel and spend time with each other. For those of us who are driven by the regular cadence and rhythm of work throughout the year, taking time off can sometimes be a little jarring. But to observe an entire season where we can tone down our pace is almost unthinkable. And yet Pope Leo XIV, Andrea, and the wisdom that we can gain from sourdough encourages us to do that. We go on from there to speak about Father Benedict Groeschel, because he was born on this day in 1933. The man left a giant legacy of service and selfless gift to others. We're joined by our friend Doug Keck of EWTN to talk about him. Doug knew him personally and is able to share insights of the wisdom of Father Benedict Groeschel. And then finally, we're joined by Mo Guernon to talk about the inspiring life and legacy of John Paul I. And if you ask why, it is because we don't remember him enough. We don't talk about him enough. And it's crucial that as we think about our present Holy Father, we don't forget those who were fathers before him. All this we talk about after the headlines.
Thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Wednesday, July 23rd. It's the Feast of St. John Cassian. Today's news brought to you by Ave Maria University. Your vocation location is at avemaria.edu. Pope Leo has returned to the Vatican after spending the last 2 weeks on summer retreat at the papal residence in Castel Gandolfo, where he had several meetings and other appointments. The Pontiff's return to Rome coincides with the final preparations for the Jubilee of Youth, which will begin on July 28th. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard says criminal implications are possible regarding the Obama administration and the 2016 election. She released more declassified documents connected with allegations that former President Obama and his administration manufactured evidence that Russia interfered. Obama's office calls the allegations outrageous, bizarre, and a weak attempt at distraction. The Trump administration is being blocked from detaining Kilmar Abrego Garcia. This comes as Abrego Garcia is set to be released on bail while he waits trial on human smuggling charges. He was returned to the U.S. last month to face human smuggling charges. The Abrego Garcia case has become a flashpoint for President Trump's immigration policies. We won't be seeing grand jury transcripts related to a probe into Jeffrey Epstein anytime soon. A judge rejected the Department of Justice's request made at the direction of the president today. Trump has faced pressure from both sides of the aisle to release more files on the convicted sex offender. And Malcolm Jamal Warner's drowning death on Sunday is being called accidental. Warner, who was best known for his role on The Cosby Show, was caught in a rip current along with his 8-year-old daughter while swimming in the ocean off Costa Rica. The child was rescued. According to local police, Warner received over 45 minutes of CPR but couldn't be revived. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches, in work, the person exercises and fulfills in part the potential inscribed in his nature. Sanctifying work is intentional. That truth came home to Andrea Pachotti-Bear recently through the simple act of baking bread, and she joins us. Andrea is no stranger to the program. She is legal analyst for EWTN News and director of the Conscience Project. You can follow her work at conscience-project.org. Andrea, great to speak with you again. How are you?
I'm doing great, Marcus. How are you doing?
I'm well, and I want to start by saying this isn't something I share too much, so it's hilarious that I'm sharing this on international air, but I bake sourdough as well, so I read this with a little bit of mirth, but also with some relatability.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will say that this is one of my daughter's side hustles. And she got the sourdough starter from some friends 2 summers ago when we were traveling in the Midwest, and it's been interesting kind of what we've learned along the way, both how to endure a brick loaf when you don't feed the starter, and the value of feeding that starter, which is really a good analogy for our own professional life and our life in sanctifying our work and giving it to God, that we really do need to have moments, in summertime is a perfect time to feed our own professional starter.
It's so funny because I look at my starter and I don't think I've ever pondered it that deeply. It was just a matter of mastering the method. But I guess beginning there, like you mentioned, that the gospel really does permeate every aspect of human existence. So let's backtrack, if you will. You mentioned summertime. I want to highlight that it really is uniquely in the West that the notion of leisure, especially during the summer, is observed. It's observed in a virtuous manner. You don't really see this in the Eastern Hemisphere. Work is expected to run through the year, through all the days of your life. Speak about that a little bit and what that does for the human culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whatever culture we are in, we know that our lives can be offering to God, right? Our lives can be a beautiful offering, and that our work is an extension of our prayer. We know that both Vatican II made that very clear, and that holiness was for everyone. It wasn't just limited to religious priests and those in the religious life, but it's for all people of faith, all Catholics especially. And that when we think about our work, we don't need to just limit the idea of work, what can be offered to God, what we do in an office. Especially we've come to understand, I was a stay-at-home mom for over a decade, and I considered the work that I did at home, raising children, cleaning the house, folding laundry, mountains of laundry, Marcus, was work that could be sanctified. And it was work that when my intentions did change to offering them up to God, it was the same work, but it was just done with a greater level of love, dedication and devotion. And, thinking about summertime, we don't stop working. We may not be going to an office anymore. We may not be producing the same kinds of work that we do professionally, but our lives are still lives that are productive. We know that both when we're taking vacation, but also when we're in retirement. And I can see that we're staying right now with my 85-year-old parents, and their lives are lives of work that can be sanctified. Right.
And because work can be sanctified, the smallest to the greatest of our work in participation is a small participation in the grander work of God's own creative work. So tell us about Pope Leo's insights then into the different cadences of life through the year.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just loving paying attention to what the Pope is doing. I mean, it's just, obviously we should be paying attention to the Holy Father, regardless of who the Holy Father is, but it's very exciting. it's very exciting because we're just at the beginning of this pontificate. We've got an American Pope. I had several years in South America, so I can kind of appreciate the cadence that he brings, having been a Spanish speaker for so long. Sometimes I think he's still thinking in Spanish, even when he's speaking in English. And so it's beautiful. And this past Sunday, in a beautiful homily that he gave, he talked about work. And he talked about it in the context of summer, that summer is that time to kind of reset in some respects. It's an opportunity to see people again, an opportunity to kind of change the rhythm. We have more quote unquote free time where we can grow both in our relationship with other people, but also in our relationship with our Lord. And he, you know, as a good father that he is, was saying, make good use of this time. Leave behind our worries and the activism, the whirlwind of commitments. To take that time for reflection, both in our relationships with others, but also, of course, our relationship with God.
And because taking that time allows for the space for reflection, all of a sudden doing something like kneading sourdough teaches us that we're kneading the faith into even our leisure and our work.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is where we really do see ourselves as leaven. Right? We are leaven for a world that's pretty darn flat, right? And you can see it. You can see how just when we bring our faith, and it doesn't need to be kind of an in-your-face faith. It can just be a joyful, peaceful faith into an agitated world. It seems to lift everyone else around us as well as lifting up ourselves. And that's a good reminder that, you know, that we have to also be thinking of our own interior life and growing that, being around people that will help us grow and expand our own interior life. But it's funny that, and this is maybe because we've made terrible loaves of bread. If you don't have, in this case of sourdough, a starter that's active, you know, that's been fed, that's rested, you get a mess. It's a waste. It's a waste of ingredients. Oftentimes, you know, I'm always like, we're eating it anyway. You know, but
that's me too.
But it was like a little brick in your belly. And we don't want to be a brick in the belly of life. We want to actually be something that's nourishing, that's enriching. The other thing that is beautiful, and I'm sure you know this in the context of sourdough baking, sourdough came from someplace else. You know, we didn't just grab it out of, you know, the yeast in the air. It's been passed on through generations, carefully cared for, fed, shared. And that's a really great way to think about our relationship with the communion of saints. Right? And the believers here on earth and those who came before us. It's been nourished, it's been cared for, and it's up to us then to use it and make good of it and help to nourish others with it as well.
So from there, I want to touch on one thing that might offend the sensibilities of fellow sourdough bakers, and that it's a trick I've used before, I want to confess. If your starter, you're not confident in it being active enough to give you a rise, you can add yeast to the mixture. So and even that provides an insight into how we ought to think about our faith life.
No, absolutely, Marcus. And I'm going to say our recipe always says add a teaspoon of yeast to it because when we don't, it's like, oh, this is terrible. And again, that's a good reminder of the beauty of collaborative work. You know, we are people in relation. You know, God made us to live in community. And so it'd be very prideful to think that, you know, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to convert the world on my own. You know, obviously that's, we're just instruments for God, but we also work in communion, in relation with another. And it's a great time, you know, thinking about our own relationship with the church. You know, I'm later this evening going to, you know, the 6:30 p.m. Mass at the local parish. It's not my normal parish, but I am part of that church community, that prayerful community, and to join with the church, you know, to think about at every moment in our day, there's a Mass being celebrated somewhere. And that's the beauty of the universal church that we have. And to think about we can join our prayers, we can join our work, and we can make a good loaf of bread doing so.
Andrea, I really enjoyed this, and this was nice. It was good to have a bit of a rising conversation, if you will. My guest has been, thank you, Andrew. My guest has been Andrew Pichotti-Bear, who is legal analyst for EWTN News and director of the Conscience Project. We've been talking about lessons in leisure and work and how even sourdough can teach us about the faith. I'm Marcus Peter.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marcus Peter, host of Ave Maria in the Afternoon and Unveiling the Covenants. Ave Maria Radio has been at the forefront of dialoguing faith at the intersection of all things pertaining to human flourishing. We need your help. Our infrastructure is in urgent need of updating. We want to ask you to support us in this summer campaign. Every gift, no matter how big or small, will be useful to bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thank you. You are broadcasting hope with us.
When the need for senior care arises, home is where the heart is. Visiting Angels provides home care for mom or dad up to 24 hours per day, including personal care, meals, and light housework. You may select your professional caregiver with Visiting Angels. More information at visitingangels.com or at 877-374-LIVE. That's 877-374-LIVE. Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Today is the birthday of Father Benedict Groeschel. He passed on to the Lord in the year 2014. And it was a truly blessed going from this side of the veil to the next. He was a towering figure in American Catholic life. Started off a Capuchin priest and psychologist, author, retreat master, television host, one of the co-founders of a noteworthy congregation, the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. There's much to talk about him and even more to remember of his heritage. Joining me to have this conversation is our friend Doug Keck of EWTN. Doug, great to speak with you again. How are you?
Yeah, good, Marcus. Thank you for inviting me on such a special remembrance for such a great, wonderful man.
Oh, the moment I found out it was his birthday, you were the first person that came to mind. And one of the main reasons is you've told me how you knew him personally and knew him well. So, Doug, please share with us insights that one wouldn't get from an article.
Well, I don't know. I mean, so much of his writing is so wonderful and so personal that it's tough not to get who he was from what he wrote and certainly what he spoke. But, he was an incredibly humble guy. Who loved his faith, who loved the poor, but he was a lot like Mother in some ways, in the sense that he stood up and he was willing to fight. He was very, very pro-life, on the pro-life movement, and he didn't suffer fools on things where people were, one of my favorite stories always, because it just was even within the last month or so we had in the the readings about the loaves and the fishes and stuff. And he always used to call the thing the soggy fish sandwich story, where he said, well, it's just that everybody was sharing a sandwich in their pocket, and that's really what they did. And that's what he used to call it. So when I hear anybody talk about those or kind of bring that up, and I'm like, there's this level of it being sharing, but as Father Mitch Pack was said one time, he said, listen, that was the nature of that society. You shared. That's what people did. We saw about the visitors to Abraham and stuff like that, you know what I mean?
Right.
You give, you share. That's the culture. Getting people to share is not a miracle. It's natural. So it's not what happened. If that's all that happened, nobody would have even noted it. And since sometimes that gets played up to take, in a sense, to miraculize the scriptures and things like that. So I always think of Father Benedict with the soggy fish sandwich story, you know, and what are they kidding? You know, and he was a big believer in Eucharistic adoration and a wonderful supporter of Mother Angelica over the years. And his other buddy, of course, Father Andrew Postley, was also, I was very privileged to call him a friend as well. And I've always said, if, you know, I think Benedict Groeschel's a saint. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I believe many, if not all of our listeners would agree. And one of the many things that I think we take for granted because we were so close to what he was doing for us that we didn't realize he was a master of human behavior, and he wove that into how he read the scriptures, but also his spirituality, how he preached to us.
But absolutely, and it was the perfect balance of taking that man-made kind of psychological knowledge and interweaving it with spirituality, not overwhelming his spirituality with it, you know, but being able to use both and be very practical in his approach of things. So, you know, there are things like scrupulosity, but because some people are scrupulous doesn't mean you shouldn't feel guilty about doing bad things.
Right.
Kind of a thing. You know, that kind of right balance that he would find these things. And one of the great incidents I remember him telling me one time, he just said, you know, psychology doesn't fix you. It helps you learn to cope with the problems that you already have. And that's what it does. It's not magic that way. And he says a lot of people, I think, expect somehow it's going to relieve them of all these problems. And in that way, in some ways, it's like the faith, which is, you know, some people think, okay, now I'm going to name it and claim it, and now I'm saved, and life should be good, and if life's not good, maybe I have a said faith and not a lived faith, and, you know, those kind of things. And as a Catholic, we can feel the same way. Here, I'm going to Mass, I'm doing the right things, I love the Lord, and meanwhile, you know, life has been tough, and look at these. I mean, just think the other day, which we just saw, Trent Horn's wife, turns out she's got malignant brain cancer, and those are the things you sit to yourself and you remind yourself of when St. Teresa Avila said, you know, if this is the way you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few, Lord. After she fell in the mud, you know, but Benedict was, you know, he was amazing. He was like an Energizer bunny. He was one of these people. He was like, a little like Donald Trump in the sense that I don't know how much sleep he actually needed. He used to take cat naps. You know, he'd say to me one time, can I use this office over here? You know, okay. Yeah. And he'd go inside there and shut down like 3CPO in Star Wars, you know. I'm going to shut down now for 20 minutes. He'd sit there, and then he'd get up, and then he was recharged, and off he went.
That's so great. You know, even that, I believe, is such a testimony to his life of grace and his spirituality, that he trusted between his bodily need for rest, but also the tremendous amount of reliance on grace to continue the work God had called him to.
Right, and one of the great insights I remember he had when he left the Capuchins and he went to found the CFRs, he said, we're never going to own property. He said, too many religious orders became real estate holding investment companies.
Wow.
He said, that's not what our job isn't to manage real estate. Ours is to reach souls and manage souls. And if you ever went to, you know, sometimes people say, well, he lives up at this retreat house. It's right off the Long Island Sound. He lived in the garage, okay, which in the back of the garage was a little tiny room. The rest of the garage was basically where his tapes and books were. And that's where they'd send material out from. And he slept on a little bed in the back room. And that's it. And that's the kind of thing where you said, here's a man who's living out his faith. Here's a man who walks the talk.
Yeah.
There's no way about it. You know, he was very simple in that way. He didn't ask for much. But if he needed it, he'd ask for it.
You know, Doug, without canonizing Father Groeschel, I also want to highlight one of the main intents, like you mentioned, of co-founding the CFRs was to embrace even greater the radical call to poverty for the sake of the gospel.
Oh, absolutely, and to work with the poor.
Yep.
And that was really their priority throughout, was to be that radical call teach the faith, and work directly with the poor. And he saw that as being the charism of the Franciscans and what their call was to do, which is why they were in the South Bronx, why he was living at the end in Newark before he also went to that was Newark Cathedral that we went to when he passed. And I was actually anchored the coverage with Father Andrew at the time. And we went up to do that, and it was very emotional and very powerful. And you should see, and the people who were there, and the well-known people who were there, and just the so many lives touched. You know, he used to say about EWTN, and I think it went 10 times for him, which is, we'll never know how much good you've done till you get to the other side.
Right.
But, I mean, here was somebody, Stumbling Blocks and Stepping Stones, Arise from Darkness, two of those books are really reaching out to people who are struggling in their lives, the same way Mother would reach out to so many of our viewers, you know, and get them where they are in their pain. And relate to those kinds of things and try and boost them up with the faith and the love of Jesus, you know. And I think the favorite thing he did every year was give away free turkeys to the poor around Christmas time.
So we have about 30 seconds. You knew him well. What would he as a spiritual father want us to be exhorted to right now?
I think he would exhort us not to lose faith, to realize that things have always been bad in the church in different ways at different times. He used to say, do you think this is bad? There's one time in the church, people would be sitting there praying, people would be walking up and down the aisles selling stuff. So he said, you got to realize that there's always difficulties, but the truth is the truth.
Right. Doug, I want to say thank you very much for making the time to share with us about Father Benedict.
Oh, anytime. I love to talk about him, as you gathered.
My guest has been Doug Keck of EWTN, who knew Father Benedict Groeschel personally. Today is Father Benedict Groeschel's birthday. You know, do procure a copy of some of his classics, his writings that teach us profound mysteries about knowing Christ and knowing him well, like Father Benedict clearly did. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Experience an unforgettable evening with Grammy Award-winning artist Rebecca St. James. The concert is Tuesday, July 29th at 7 p.m. at St. Isidore Church in Macomb. Tickets start at just $23. Presented by St. Kieran and St. Isidore Catholic Churches. Purchase tickets online at stkieran.org. That's STKIERAN.org. Don't miss your chance to see Rebecca St. James live in concert.
Resetting your password, unsubscribing from emails, printing anything. Why are simple things sometimes so complicated? Thankfully, with an auto owner's insurance independent agent, getting the right coverage for your business doesn't have to be one of them, so you can get back to more important things, like learning how that printer works. That's simple human sense.
Call Choice Insurance Agency at 734-641-4200. Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
Light of the East, weekends on Ave Maria Radio.
I am Father Thomas Loya. This week on Ave Maria,
charity begins at home. As the church is charitable throughout the world, let charity also begin at home with things that a Latin Rite Catholic should never ask an Eastern Catholic.
Now on Ave Maria Radio's newest FM stations, 105.5 FM in Southfield and 107.9 FM in Ann Arbor.
A couple of weeks into the COVID-19 lockdown, I was getting anxious. I realized my feeling of being unsettled was more than just wanting to get out of the house. I had stopped my daily rosary and chaplet that I was doing during Lent, and I realized that had something to do with it. I also was spending way too much time on social media, and my Chaldean temper began to flare at the news stories and commentaries as it related to keeping abortion clinics open while other businesses had to close. During a time away from the world, you can meditate. During a time of discernment, You could talk to God. Ask Him how He wants you to grow from a particular experience. Ask Him what He wants you to learn. There's so much unknown in a crisis and often throughout life. This is the time we remind ourselves that God is in control and our trust is in Him. So go ahead and ask Him, "Dear Lord, what are you asking of me today?" This has been a Christ Center communication message. I'm Vanessa Danhagarmo, a communications evangelist.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marcus Peter, host of Ave Maria in the Afternoon and Unveiling the Covenants. Ave Maria Radio has been at the forefront of dialoguing faith at the intersection of all things pertaining to human flourishing. We need your help. Our infrastructure is in urgent need of updating. We want to ask you to support us in this summer campaign. Every gift, no matter how big or small, will be useful to bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thank you. You are broadcasting hope with us.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. That's AveMaria.com.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. We know that thousands of books have been written about St. John Paul the Great, one of the most influential popes in modern history, but very little has been said about his predecessor, who, we all know this, only sat on the chair of Peter for about a month. Mo Guernon joins us with a look at his life. Mo Guernon is the author of Love is a Journey, the inspiring life and legacy of Pope John Paul I. Mo, it's great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
I want to begin by addressing that it's not much of an elephant in the room, but it's a reality that we all know. John Paul I sat upon the papal throne for all of 33 days, and I believe for those who were alive at the time, it must have been a gut-wrenching experience to have to go through the death of your spiritual father all over again in a conclave for the second time.
It certainly was. For many people like me, it felt as if it were a personal loss, as if someone close to us, a family member, had passed. And John Paul I had this incredible mystique about him. He had drawn hundreds of millions of people who were spellbound by him. That's perhaps the best word I can use. And so when he passed so unexpectedly, it really, really rocked the world.
Can you describe to us, in a nutshell, before we do a little bit more of a deep dive, some of the backgrounds that he had? We know that he was a Thomist, he had some Augustinian schooling, but he was also very simple in the way he conducted himself in his pastoral life.
Yes, he was. As a matter of fact, the point you raise is a really salient one, because he, even at the time that he became Pope, he saw himself primarily as a pastor. When he was Bishop of Vittorio Veneto, a very small diocese, people were shocked there because he was always inside the diocese, visiting parishes. As a matter of fact, during his tenure there, he visited all 139 parishes twice. He was very, very close to the people. When he became Patriarch of Venice, a fine example of his closeness to the people and his regard for the poor, the dispossessed, the least among us, was that he ordered that the Patriarch's residence be open at all hours of the day and night. And he welcomed all people. His secretary at the time, Monsignor Senegalia, said that people would come in who were unemployed, poor, people who were mentally challenged, alcoholics, prostitutes, and he met with all of them and provided them with sources of comfort and assistance, got jobs for many of them. And in terms of his simplicity, part of it was something that he had learned early on as a seminarian from the local pastor in his hometown of Canale d'Agorville. But he was also greatly influenced by Saint de Sales, who himself was a very simple man, and he was greatly influenced by him.
Tell us about the historical milieu of the time, both in the church and in the world, of the conclave that elected him.
Well, it was a very difficult time for the church, because it was post-Vatican II, when the church had undergone some major changes. And there was a schism of sorts in the church. There were those people who endorsed the reforms. Luciani was one of those people. But there were also a good many people in the hierarchy of the church who were termed traditionalists or conservatives, who were opposed to those changes. And so when Pope Paul VI died, there was a fear that the conclave would last a long time because of the factions that existed.
Right.
Strangely enough, the conclave that elected Albino Luciani as John Paul I was one of the swiftest in history. He won on the fourth ballot, one day, 25 hours. And a large part of that was that he was considered to be a moderate, someone who was not ideologically rigid. And his personality, his character, his humility really won over cardinals across the spectrum.
And precisely because of that, when you consider his election, it's no surprise to anyone that the cardinals, our father cardinals, believed they had elected a docile, pastoral moderate to the papal chair. And tell us about him stepping onto the loggia and what that represented.
Well, it was interesting because he did not want to be pope. He did not expect to become pope. And that was true, by the way, throughout his career, because he initially refused to become bishop, but Pope John insisted on it. So when he first appeared on the central balcony of St. Peter's as pope, he looked a little nervous at first, and then that magical moment when he burst into this radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire piazza of St. Peter's, it's as if he underwent a very rapid transformation, and the crowd went wild. And the amazing thing about it is that he wanted to speak, but it was not tradition at that time for popes to speak at their first appearance. And so the only thing that he said was giving the blessing.
Right.
And so we really didn't have much of an idea of who this man was. He was well known in the northern part of Italy, but outside of that, he was pretty obscure. But even during that brief moment, it was electric. There was an American woman there who was present who had seen 5 popes in person, and she said she had never experienced anything like this. And the effect that brief appearance had probably is best exemplified by the fact that the next day when he delivered his first Angelus, it was estimated that up to 250,000 people showed up. It was just amazing.
Right. If you don't mind, I'd like to step back just a little to talk about the confusing circumstances of the smoke that you rightly highlight in your book.
Yes.
Just share with us what happened.
Okay, so basically it's an ancient way to announce whether a pope has been elected or not. What happens is that
black smoke.
I'm sorry?
Our listeners are familiar with the black smoke and white smoke, but tell us what happened at the ballot electing Pope John Paul I.
Okay, so what happened is that there was massive confusion because as the smoke first started coming out, it appeared dark. And people reached the conclusion, including the journalists who were covering it, thought, it's black smoke, we don't have a pope. And yet, as the smoke continued to come out, it was changing colors, and it would turn light, and so on. And so there was great confusion in the piazza. Some people had started leaving, thinking, well, I'll come back tomorrow when a pope might have been elected.
Right. So let's pause there on a cliffhanger because we're hearing the music. We'll continue with Mo Guernon on the other side of the break about the election of Pope John Paul II, and we want to talk about his life, his legacy, what we remember from him, and despite his short time on the papal chair, what he taught us. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Beckway Door is a top provider of garage doors as well as home entry, patio, and storm doors. Locally owned since 1978, we give free, no-pressure quotes at prices 20% lower than most competitors, and often provide same-day service for garage door repairs. Mention Ave Maria Radio for 10% off the replacement or service of your garage door or the installation of new exterior doors. Visit BeckwayDoor.com. That's BeckwayDoor.com.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Looking for a retreat venue for your youth group, sports team, ministry, or staff event? St. Francis Retreat Center in DeWitt sits on a picturesque 95-acre property, complete with 3 large conference rooms, 2 chapels, 2 dining rooms with commercial kitchens, meeting spaces for smaller groups, overnight lodging, and a professional staff to make your event a success. Call 517-669-8321 or visit stfrancis.ws to book your event today.
Ron Finn here, inviting you to join Dave Basheris, Pat Odie-Murray, and me for Morning Offering, the Catholic way to start your day.
We welcome some very special guests each day, including Teresa Tomeo, Andrew Reinhardt, Dr. Ray Garendi, and Matthew Archbold. Plus, my chat with Pat, talking with Catholic experts from all over.
Plus, we're having fun along the way so you can start your day with a smile. Morning Offering, weekday mornings at 8 here on the Ave Maria Radio family of stations.
Marcus Peter hosts Unveiling the Covenant.
What is a covenant? It's a vowed exchange of lives which results in an unbreakable family bond. Throughout Scripture, God seeks to espouse all mankind to himself in an unbreakable covenant bond. His covenantal love is a free gift, but it necessitates a response from us. We are free to accept or reject it. Let's learn what this means as we unveil the covenants.
Saturday mornings at 11 and Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. on Ave Maria Radio.
Hi, I'm Father Chris Alar of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception. My new book, Understanding the Sacraments, unpacks the extraordinary gifts unique to the Catholic Church. Ever wonder why we baptize infants? Is confession in the Bible? And must wives be subordinate to their husbands? The answers to these more hot-button questions about the sacraments are on sale now from Marian Press at shopmercy.org. God bless you.
You like pizza? Me too. And for that, we can thank our friend, Tom Monahan. First, he starts with $900 and opens one pizza shop. Then it's worldwide, thousands of shops. But all this was just a warm-up for his greatest achievement yet. He built a university.
God inspired Tom to build up generations of men and women who have a hunger to reach the world for Christ. This place is Ave Maria University.
Visit avemaria.edu to see what's next.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866 Ave Maria or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter, and I'm talking with Mo Guernon, who is the author of Love is a Journey, The Inspiring Life and Legacy of Pope John Paul I. So, Mo, we left on a cliffhanger about the confusion. There was initially black smoke, and then you said the smoke seemed to change color, but by this point, many people had dispersed from St. Peter's Square.
Correct. And so what eventually happened is an announcement was made to the crowd to concentrate their gaze on the central balcony. And at that point, it took about 46 minutes from the time he went into the room of tears to change into his papal garments until the time that Cardinal Felici announced his election, and then, of course, he came out, and it was bedlam.
It was bedlam. That's an interesting way to describe it. Now, to jump ahead then, because we already spoke about the moment at the Loggia, the next day at his Wednesday address, and then the following days after, it became very clear that the passive, pastorally quiet moderate that many cardinals assumed he was not Pope John Paul I. He came out guns a-blazing. He showed himself to be a bold shepherd.
Yes, he did. And I don't think that you can underestimate some of the things that he did that were unconventional. For example, he was the first pope, I should say, to take a double name, John Paul, in honor of his two immediate predecessors, whom he admired greatly. In his first Angelus, the day after he appeared as Pope, he spoke extemporaneously. He used the first person I instead of the royal we. That had never been done by a Pope before. Right. So there was great informality there. He joked, he smiled, he used anecdotes. He spoke about his own fear when he said the moment of danger was arriving for him, meaning that it was becoming clear that he would get elected. He initially refused to use the sedia gestatoria, that portable throne that popes were carried about on the shoulders of Vatican employees. He thought that the papacy ought to be closer to the people, that it should not be a majestic type of position. And in line with that, of course, he eliminated the crowning. So at his installation, instead of wearing the triple tiara that was embedded with all kinds of jewels, he simply accepted the lamb's wool pallium, signifying his role as bishop.
Right. Tell us about how his relatives, and especially his brother, dealt with the newfound global scrutiny, especially from the media.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Marcus, because there's a great story about that. His brother, with whom he was very, very close, of course, came from the small town. About 1,000 people were living there at the time. And he was a man, apparently, who spoke his mind. And, of course, when his brother became Pope, the international press corps, the media, just descended on that little village, inundated it. And they, of course, wanted to speak with the people who were closest to the new Pope. And Berto, as he was known, was one of them. And he got so fed up with it that he made a statement, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it was this. He said, it's a very difficult job to be Pope, but it's even more difficult to be a Pope's brother. There's so many people from the press pestering me here that I would like to send them all to the devil. But what would my brother say about that?
So, considering all of that, I will say this. When he came out, especially at that Wednesday address at the ending, he mentioned, John Paul I mentioned, he had neither the acumen of Pope John the 23rd, nor the class and culture of Paul VI. But,
correct.
But then he goes on to say, but here I am as their successor. He would, however, go on to demonstrate that he truly had both in spades. And so tell us about how brilliantly and carefully he handled diplomatic relations on behalf of the Catholic Church with the world, including the United Nations.
Well, again, he had so little time in office that there was very limited opportunities for him to engage. Mm-hmm. But from the very first address that he gave the morning after the conclave that elected him, he set out a rather ambitious agenda, and one of them was to promote peace. And so, for example, at the time, President Carter in Washington was negotiating a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. And repeatedly, the Pope talked about praying for the success of what became known as the Camp David Accords. He met with the international press. He met with, after his installation, he met with all of the foreign ministers, heads of state, and such dignitaries from around the world that were there, tried to get to know them, relied heavily on Cardinal Villot, who was Secretary of State.
Right.
And he was making overtures to various denominations, and also his primary international commitment was to attempt to reconcile people, whether they were of different faiths, different ethnic groups, from different geographical areas. He believed that we ought to know, as he said, we ought to know each other.
Right.
And that, of course, implied that we need to respect each other. And that was true as individuals and also as communities and nations.
Ecumenism was one of the main thrusts of the Second Vatican Council, with the end goal of reunification with the Catholic Church. And so his diplomatic tact was such a continued spirit in light of that movement. I also want to ask you to comment on some of the global theological currents that were happening at the time, like liberation theology. He had dealt with that in Venice, and now as Pope, he dispatched perhaps the sharpest mind he had in his care to answer that in South America, in Latin America.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. He had sent Cardinal Ratzinger, who became, of course, Benedict XVI, to deal with that. And as you point out quite correctly, he had had direct experience with that when he was a cardinal. One of the interesting things about his opposition to liberation theology was that he really, in his own career and his service to the church, believed in social justice. He believed that there should be equity. He was critical of the excesses of capitalism, for example. He proposed that parishes should give 1% of their income to people in poor countries. And yet, he was very concerned that priests remain within the confines of their role as priests and not become political leaders as such.
Right.
Even if, in fact, much of their agenda was in sync with his commitment to the poor. So yes, he was opposed to liberation theology. He deeply had reservations about Marxism, which of course was an atheist philosophy. And though he embraced some elements of socialism, he thought that what a priest had to do was to be a priest and attend to his flock, to teach the catechism, to teach the good news of the gospel.
How did he, alongside that continued work of the proclamation of the gospel and his continued emphasis for true simplicity, what are some of the ways in which he transformed St. Peter's Square?
St. Peter's Square. Well, I must say that, in the eulogy at his funeral that the dean of the College of Cardinals made, he emphasized that John Paul I revolutionized St. Peter's Square, if you will, at the Wednesday general audiences, at the Angelus that was given every Sunday, because he generated an unprecedented interest in the message of the Gospels as they were related through his homilies and his talks and his speeches. And Cardinal Confalonieri, who delivered the eulogy, said that he passed like a meteor through the heavens that leaves us amazed and astonished. And he said, you look back and he brought back to the church people who otherwise had fallen away or who were on the precipice of losing their faith.
I want to thank you very much, Mo, for making the time to speak with us.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
My guest has been Mo Guernon, author of Love is a Journey, the life and legacy of Pope John Paul II. The first. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.